Okay, continuing on, we've looked at some of the basic chemical principles about bonding, covalent ionic bonds, hydrogen bonds, the importance of water and the unique properties that the water molecule has, which make it such a good solvent for the chemical reactions that keep cells going. And now we're going to look at a few other aspects of chemistry. Once again, this may be somewhat review for some of you folks, but let's put it down again just in case any folks have not had chemistry yet. Now, the first thing we're going to do is look at energy changes in chemical reactions. Okay, all reactions are going to involve some kind of change in energy. Now, although this is not really the correct mechanism, let's take a look just for conceptual purposes. Let's suppose we take hydrogen and oxygen, and we combine them together to make water. Now, most of us know that that's a very energetic reaction, reacts explosively, releases a lot of energy. That's why they use it as rocket fuel. But think of what you have to do here. In this case, you're going to have to break hydrogen to hydrogen covalent bonds and oxygen to oxygen covalent bonds. Breaking chemical bonds takes a lot of energy. Covalent bonds are very strong bonds. But when you combine them together to make water, you're going to form new covalent bonds, oxygen to hydrogen covalent bonds. When you form a covalent bond, that releases energy. So the question is, in this case, is the overall energy you get from forming these two covalent bonds greater than or equal or lesser than the energy it takes to break the appropriate covalent bonds? And then overall, you'll either get a net release of energy or you have to put energy into the system for the reaction to occur. Now, like I say, that's not really the official mechanism of how hydrogen and oxygen react, but that gives an idea. Many times when you're doing chemical reactions, you're going to have to break chemical bonds and form new ones. Now, other things, once again, energy changes in chemical reactions. They can be very large amounts of energy released, such as burning hydrogen and oxygen. That releases a tremendous amount of energy. Burning hydrocarbons, combining hydrocarbons with oxygen, that releases a lot of energy. That's one reason why, for instance, ethanol and your fuel tank doesn't give you as much mileage as, say, gasoline does. Because ethanol and oxygen, that reaction doesn't release as much energy per gram or per pound or what have you as gasoline does. Okay, so that. Some energy releases are very dramatic. Some energy releases are very subtle. If I throw salt in water and dissolve it, once again, you're breaking ionic bonds, but you're forming these attractions between water molecules and the different ions. And overall, that actually releases a little bit of energy. Not much, but if you stuck a sensitive thermometer in it, you could actually see the temperature would go up a tiny, tiny little amount. And then some reactions are slow. They may take a long time, like dissolving something in water. It may take quite a while for that to happen. Other reactions go real fast, like the explosion of a stick of dynamite. And that makes a difference too, the reaction rates. How quickly are you releasing that energy? An interesting little sidelight. If you go and grab yourself one of those snack bags of potato chips upstairs, the energy released by metabolizing those potato chips is actually more than the energy release of setting off a standard half-pound stick of dynamite. In fact, actually considerably more. So, how come those potato chips don't blow you up? They may bloat you up, especially if you eat lots of them, but here again, it's the rates of the reaction. That dynamite reaction happens in about a 10,000th of a second. It takes several hours for you to metabolize that energy that's stored in the form of the fats and the carbohydrates and stuff in the potato chips. But actually, in energetic terms, it turns out that metabolizing those little bags of potato chips releases more energy than setting off a stick of dynamite. It's just the rates of the reactions differ. So a stick of dynamite, you set off, you tear things apart, send them sailing all over the place. That generally doesn't happen with potato chips, usually not. Okay, all right, so all these reactions are going to either release or give up energy. There's going to be a change in energy. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of diagram something here. Just to show this point, we use hydrogen and oxygen. It's a great example of that. Okay, this diagram here is a representation of energy. As a matter of fact, for you chemically inclined, that's Gibbs free energy here. Don't worry about if you're not chemically inclined. Okay, we start out with our reactants. All right. Now, they have locked in the molecules a fairly large amount of energy. Now, we combine them together into our product, water. Now, notice the free energy of water is a lot less than the free energy of these reactants. So, if you're going this way, what happens is you go from high energy to low energy. And over here, this is energy released. And not only that, this reaction is pretty fast. So hydrogen and oxygen reacts explosively when you put the stuff together in light. Okay, now reactions like that are what we call exergonic reactions. Exergonic reactions release energy. Now, those of you who may remember chemistry sometimes hear the term exothermic, releases energy in the form of heat. It is actually possible. There's not only heat, but there's what we call entropy, or sort of the order, randomness of a system, whether it's, chemicals, whatever. So occasionally you have a reaction that's exergonic, but actually absorbs heat. There are some things, like if I take urea, the stuff in urine, and we use it in biochemistry a lot. Okay, make a concentrated solution of urea. Start out with room temperature water, throw like 8 or 9 molar urea, and that's about it. It's really soluble in water because it's a polar molecule. I stir this stuff up, it dissolves, it goes in the solution, telling you that that's an exergonic reaction. But what actually happens is the container gets cold. It drops down to ice water temperature. So there are a few reactions like that that actually absorb heat and cool down, but have an overall release of energy. Not very common, but that happens. Okay, but exergonic reactions release energy in one form or another. Now, a thing about exergonic reactions, once you start them, they will propagate and continue till they reach an equilibrium. It usually means a good portion of the reactants have reacted. So if I take, so let's put this, continues, one started, it continues to an equilibrium point. So if I have a bunch of hydrogen and oxygen, and I ignite it, the reaction, once I start igniting it, that reaction will continue until it reaches an equilibrium point, which is most of it reacts. There's vanishingly small amounts of free hydrogen and free oxygen left, but almost all of it reacts to form some very hot water. So let's suppose, for instance, we filled this room up with hydrogen and oxygen, cleared everybody out, and I come in here, and I open up the door, and I flick my bin. Okay, I start the reaction here, and the energy release starts causing the molecules nearby to react, and they release energy, and pretty soon it propagates in a very fast way throughout the whole room, and boom. Okay, so exergonic reactions, once you start them off, they continue to an equilibrium point, which means, many times they react to close to completion. Okay, but I could do the reverse kind of reaction. Let's suppose I started out with some water, and I stuck a couple high power electrodes in that water and turned on the current. I turn on the current, and after a while I'll start seeing bubbles of hydrogen and oxygen gas forming. So I'm doing this reaction in this case in reverse. Now what it means is you have to go up in energy from low energy, low free energy to high free energy, and that's the energy you need to put into the system. And a reaction that takes energy is what we call an endergonic reaction. Okay. Now, unlike exergonic reactions, endergonic reactions stop when you remove the energy source. They need a constant input of energy for the reactions to occur. So, if I'm trying to make hydrogen and oxygen by, running electricity through water, the minute I turn the current off, the reaction stops. And that's it. Turn the current back on, and now get some more bubbles forming. Okay, so endergonic reactions. Endergonic reactions stop dead in their tracks when the energy source is removed. Now, when we talk about the chemistry of life, it turns out that much of the stuff that we need to keep ourselves and our cells going are a whole bunch of endergonic reactions. Every time we take amino acids and make a protein out of it, that requires energy. Every time we join sugars together to make a polysaccharide, that requires energy. Every time we replicate DNA or synthesize an RNA molecule, that requires energy. All of those are endergonic reactions. So what that means is we're constantly having to provide energy to get those reactions going. And the way we do it, in the most part, is we're going to take something from the outside and oxidize it, remove electrons from it, pass those electrons to something else, and most of those oxidation reactions are exergonic. And then ultimately we produce energy-rich molecules, ATP for instance, and those are used to power these reactions. We'll see more on that later. So what we have to do, living organisms have to get some source of energy, generally by doing exergonic reactions using materials from the outside that they take in and react on. That energy is ultimately used to power the endergonic reactions that cells need to keep alive. Now, some organisms, certain types of bacteria and plants and certain types of protists, use for their main source of energy the energy of light. And that's what we call photosynthesis. They use light energy to synthesize energy-rich molecules that they can use later on. So that's a nice little trick. All you need is a good source of sunlight and some simple molecules like carbon dioxide and some water, and you're a happy camper. Okay, the rest of us, we have to get it from the outside world through food, whatever we might call food, and react on that. Okay, so that's the thing about endergonic and exergonic reactions. All reactions are going to be one or the other, maybe not much, maybe dramatically. Now you may wonder here, I got this diagram here. Okay, it looks like I left something out, and indeed I did leave something out. I didn't quite complete this diagram. How come? Well, let's kind of thought experiment. Let's suppose we fill this room up with hydrogen and oxygen. Turn out the lights, turn out all sources of ignition, what have you. Come back tomorrow, and the room's still going to be filled with hydrogen and oxygen. Come back on graduation day, it'll still be filled up with hydrogen and oxygen. Your kids come in. Your future children come to JSU. They're coming to JSU, right? I hope, right? Hey, keeps us in mind. Okay. Okay, but they come in, and this room is still hydrogen and oxygen. In other words, that reaction has not occurred, even though it's an extremely exergonic reaction. Now, on the other hand, though, if I were to walk in this room and with a lighter, a lit cigarette, a source of sparks or something like that, all of a sudden, boom, the reaction would take place. So that reaction takes place at high temperatures, like we find at the edge of a flame or a spark or whatever, but doesn't take place at room temperature to an appreciable extent. It will react extremely slowly. Okay, well, how come? How come a highly exergonic reaction simply isn't reacting at room temperature? Well, that's because all chemical reactions have a sort of energetic barrier or hump they have to get over. In many cases, it means the molecules have to collide fast enough so that the electron shells will interact with each other and electrons will get passed back and forth and things like that. If they don't collide fast enough, they'll simply bounce off each other and nothing happens. And that energetic hump, that's not the only way, by the way. That energetic hump is what we call the activation energy of a reaction. All right. All reactions have some level of activation energy. It may be very high, it may be relatively low. But the energy, the average energy of molecules at room temperature, the hydrogen and oxygen in this case, is below that of the activation energy barrier. So only a tiny fraction of those molecules are actually going to react. Not enough to really do much of anything. Now another example is methane, natural gas, and oxygen. If you mix methane and oxygen together and light it, it's going to explode on you. Once in a while you hear somebody's house getting blown up or an apartment building getting blown up from a gas leak that happened to ignite. At room temperature, those molecules will react, but so few of them do that at room temperature, it takes about 10 years for half of those methane molecules to react with oxygen. The reaction rates are that slow because only a tiny fraction at room temperature of those molecules exceed the activation energy barrier. So we have that. Now think of this. When you leave class and lab today, you drive back, it's sitting, if you have a full tank of gas, sitting about 2 or 3 feet below you, about 10 feet behind you, is enough energy to equal 100 sticks of dynamite. And you're right next to it. But generally you don't have to worry about all that gasoline in your tank. It will not react at room temperature. In order for it to react, they run it through the spark plugs. The spark plugs ignite the mixture because the spark is very, very hot. That ignites the mixture in your cylinders, and you get these mini explosions, and now you drive around. Okay, because even though, once again, burning of gasoline, mostly octane, and oxygen is a very exergonic reaction, but its activation energy is higher than the energy of those molecules at room temperature. To get them to react at an appreciable rate, you have to heat them up. Throw a match in, a spark plug, whatever the case may be. Even the paper and stuff in your books and notebooks, at room temperature, you don't have to worry so much about them. If I were to set somebody's notebook on fire, one, you'd come up screaming to the dean and get me in serious trouble. And two, that heat from that flame would overcome the activation energy, and the cellulose that's in your lab notebooks and your notebooks and stuff would react with oxygen, and the stuff would catch on fire. At room temperature, it doesn't, but high enough temperature, it will ignite. So we have a lot of examples of reactions that are very exergonic but won't occur at room temperature because room temperature molecules can't overcome the activation energy barrier. Now, that's not always the case. There are many reactions that will occur at room temperature because they exceed the activation energy barrier. For instance, if I take nitric acid, I can mix it. In fact, that's one reason we have nitric acid in our department. It's stored separately in its own container, in its own little separate chemical storage cabinet. Reason why is nitric acid is such a powerful oxidizer that many times if it combines with any of a wide range of organic molecules, the activation energy is so low that those things will spontaneously react at room temperature. In other words, you mix nitric acid with any of a number of organic molecules and they catch on fire. Sometimes they practically explode. There's a lot of rockets that use, especially back in the days of the Cold War, many rockets used these derivatives of nitric acid and some organic molecules because they would ignite on contact with each other. All you had to do was open up the valves of the fuel tanks. You didn't have to worry about igniter systems that might fail and things like that. When they landed people on the moon, they wanted to make sure that the engines that got you down, and most importantly got you back up again, were as simple and as foolproof as possible. So once again, they dispensed with igniter systems. They used fuels that ignited on contact with each other. And fuel tanks that were pressurized. They didn't need pumps. All you did was open up two valves. The fuels mixed together in the engine's combustion chamber and they ignited. And if those valves didn't open up, you had a backup. You pushed a button and you literally blew the valves open. There was a backup system, which was never used. But obviously you didn't want two astronauts stuck on the moon. It just didn't look good. It wasn't good for the astronauts. It certainly didn't look good for America's prestige. So they want to make sure that they had a rocket engine that was as fail-proof as you could possibly design it. And they did. And one of the things was these self-igniting fuels. In these cases, once again, at room temperature, those molecules react spontaneously, and they're very exergonic reaction. The activation energy barrier is low enough that they react at room temperature. If you cool those fuels down enough, you'd reach a point where they wouldn't ignite, but we weren't going to find that out here, and you wouldn't find that in the lunar surface either. So all they had to do, open up a couple valves, and off you go, back home. All right, so that's the thing. Not all, many reactions do have activation energy barriers that are low enough for reactions to occur at room temperature, but not all of them. All right, so that's what we see here, activation energy barrier. Now I'm going to make that barrier a little bit higher just for our purposes here, our next thing. Ow. Okay, here we go. All right, big activation energy barrier. All right, now, using hydrogen and oxygen as an example again. It's possible, if I fill this room with hydrogen and oxygen, if I add heat to it, some of those molecules nearby will overcome the activation energy barrier and the whole room will explode. But there is another way of doing that. And we'll see that in just one second.